Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Coming up on the programme.
And I went to the DVO on Innes and applied for my tax. No way. Several times. And as you can appreciate, 2000, 2001 and 2002 were the reference years.
A County Clare farmer takes his complaint of a bureaucratic nightmare to Europe, and TB hits hard in County Kerry.
We have 69 as reactors.
How are you dealing with that?
There's a lot of stress with it.
But first, some breaking news this Wednesday. Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed has finally announced the details of a fodder transport scheme for farmers hit by awful weather since last summer in the northwest. His department will pay 8 to 12 euros per bale for haulage, and we'll have all the details in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. Minister Creed spoke with Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Hannah Quinn Mulligan.
It's localised. There's a lot of fodder, that is being sold in the region.
You acknowledge that, yeah.
Where there is an issue that people have engaged with the tax fodder budgeting service, and the haulage is over 100 kilometres, because we don't want the impact on the localised trade, which is strong at the moment. And those who are engaged in are members of the farming community as well, and have always engaged in this practice. We don't want to cut across that. Where there's long distance haulage, there'll be a subsidy.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
You must have heard about Tom Clare, the County Clare suckler farmer who shot to fame when one of his cows had quadruplet calves last year. Tom was in the news again this week for another reason. He travelled to Brussels to bring a complaint to the EU about a row with the department over cattle tags. Phelim O'Neill was there, and he met Tom and the Fine Gael MEP, Sean Kelly.
It goes back right to 2001. We had spare tags from 2000, and they unfortunately went out and got burned. And I applied to Mullinahone for my tags in 2001. Mullinahone came back, the short change being tags, and I got on to him again, and I told him this scene about the tags getting destroyed. So they told me to apply for replacement tags. I went to the department, I went to the DVO on Innes and applied for my tags. No way. Several times. And as you can appreciate, 2000, 2001 and 2002 were the reference years. I couldn't apply for because the calf had to be registered to the mother to get the suck and go premium out of. Mm-hmm. And I had no tags. I hadn't as much as one tag in my farm, or Mary hadn't as much as one in her farm.
So basically this is a case where you had two hard numbers you like within the family, one and your wife's that came down through the family line. And there was a case, there was a family bereavement, a batch of tags were accidentally disposed of. You went to get those replaced, and you basically found you couldn't get those replaced.
That's right.
Meanwhile, you had the cattle on the farm without the registration, without the tags to register them, and you were left in no man's land, if you like. Those were the reference years, so therefore they couldn't be brought in as part of the calculation of what your entitlement would be for under the CAP. You followed this up in Ireland. You didn't get any satisfaction with the department.
Before we go as far as that. That was the year the foot and mouth was rife in England and Northern Ireland, and every farmer was an edge in Ireland for fear it would come in, including myself. Mm-hmm. The department were fully aware several times, sometimes 3 times a day, that they had 30 cattle left untagged, unregistered and unaccounted for. And if them cattle happened to get into the wrong hands, they were in my safe hands, but if they happened to get into the wrong hands in that year, they had the potential to write off the beef industry in Ireland.
But you followed this up at home with the national authorities, and you didn't get any satisfaction. I suppose it might bring you, Sean, in at this point here. You felt you heard this man's case, you heard this man's story, you were persuaded to get involved. You feel that the Department of Agriculture didn't perform as it should have in Ireland.
Yes, I was asked to meet him by Malty McDonough, who happened to be chairman of the Clare County Board at the time, and I met Tom and I heard this case and I said this is very wrong. And first of all, because of the way it developed, I think the department were probably somewhat suspicious because there were 2 hard numbers and so forth, and I think they probably felt he was going to do something with the tags. Now, I asked him that. There was no issue with that. He could have, if he wanted to. He could have disposed of those cattle and said they wouldn't bother him at all. He could have done that. So I said, this is very wrong. And especially when I saw it was the reference years. If it was 1 year too bad enough, but the reference years continued on, meant that he was discriminated against all that time and ever since. So I said, if there's no way of dealing with it in Ireland, I'll try and bring it to the Petitions Committee here in Europe, because I think he has a strong case and it should be dealt with.
So here we are, 17 years later, if you like, you're at the Petitions Committee this afternoon in Brussels. Were you satisfied with the hearing that you got there and the outcome of it? Maybe you'd explain it to us what they have decided or what they announced that they would do today.
Yeah, I was very happy, and I spoke to some of my colleagues over the last 2 years trying to get it on the agenda, and thankfully it came on the agenda today because they're very busy. But with the constraints on the committee, I think I was very happy with the outcome. First of all, the Commission said they had sympathy for the situation, and they said the Irish officials should deal with it. I think reading between the lines, to me anyway, they were saying this is not good enough, so you can deal with it in Ireland if you want to. Secondly, then, the committee even went further and they said we're going to refer it to our regular committee and maybe our budget control committee if we do not get satisfaction, because they said we must ensure that over-rigorous application of the law to the letter of the law can discriminate against genuine cases. Tom's case is a genuine case, and we want to help.
And if I might sort of look at this from a political perspective, Sean, you know, both yourself and the current Agriculture Minister in Ireland, Minister Creed, are members of the same political party. Have you made any representations to the department in Dublin on this matter to try and have it resolved at a national level? Because that was what the indication very clearly was, the committee today, that this has to be at a national level that ultimately sorts it out.
And no, because you see, it had gone through the system in Ireland, it had gone to the Ombudsman. The only next step then was for me to bring it here. So I brought it here. I knew it was in the pipeline, and until it was heard, and especially I wanted to get a positive reply here for Tom. Now I can go back and say, lads, this came up with the petitions level in the Parliament. Independent observers said this is not good enough. Now will you please try and ensure that justice is done to Tom Clare.
Final word to yourself, Tom, on this issue that's been running for 17 odd years now. Were you satisfied with the hearing that you received today at the Petitions Committee and the outcome of that?
I was very pleased. I was more than pleased with the justice. I can see justice being done at last in my case and on behalf of my wife.
Tom Clare, Sean Kelly, MEP, thank you both very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Staying with suckler farmers, the Irish Farmers Journal started a campaign in last week's edition to rally support around this sector, which is crucial for Ireland's rural economy. I caught up with our beef editor, Adam Woods, to find out what the reaction has been and what is happening next with Save Our Sucklers.
Yes, Thomas, so the Irish Farmers Journal launched a major national campaign last week, and I suppose the title Save Our Sucklers, and this is an open letter addressed to President Juncker, Commissioners Hogan and Malmstrom, on Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed, and it's calling on, I suppose, support for the sector. We've seen over the past 10 years support for the suckler sector has declined to the tune of €177 since 2006, and really, I suppose it's a really important industry. Our beef exports totaled $2.5 billion in 2017. The backbone of this industry is our suckler cow, and we have over 100,000 Irish farm families directly engaged in the production and finishing of suckler bred animals. The wider agricultural sector supports 180,000 jobs, but we've seen this steady erosion in the level of direct support towards the suckler cow, and I suppose this coincides with Irish beef farmers struggling to cope with the consequences of Brexit, a Mercosur trade deal, and there's really no other sector within any member state more exposed to the fallout we'll say, from Brexit more than the Irish beef industry. So it's against this backdrop that we felt a call of action was needed, and we printed the open letter last week in the Farmers Journal, and I suppose we're calling on farmers, rural dwellers, rural communities and the vast array of rural businesses that depend on a vibrant suckler industry to make their voices heard and sign our open letter, and that we can return it to Brussels and return it to the Irish government and say, look, rural Ireland is not dead. we're here, we're standing up for what we believe in, and we need support.
And what do you think this could achieve? What is the open letter asking those leaders to do?
So we have a number of items on the open letter. I suppose we're looking for a fully funded Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, with the commitment to introduce targeted direct support for all low-income sectors, including sucklers. We want, I suppose, protection from upcoming trade deals. I suppose Mercosur trade deal could result in 70,000 tonne of beef coming into the EU, into an already probably oversupplied market. So that could have huge consequences in terms of Ireland. Ireland exports 90% of what we produce, so we're really we'll say open to small fluctuations in international trade. We're looking to safeguard farmers' incomes in light of Brexit. Again, Brexit has huge consequences for Irish beef farmers. We export 52% of our beef exports over to the UK. There's 250,000 tonne going over to the UK on an annual basis, and if we had a hard Brexit and that market was to go in the morning, that means that we have to do a huge amount of work in terms of getting extra markets for beef. So it's really important that we protect our producers in that line. And then the last one is supporting, I suppose, the campaign for the introduction of a suckler cow payment to the tune of €200 a cow to underpin that suckler sector and halt, we'll say, the decline in that sector. Look, at suckling farming is a really tight margin business. It tends to be on our more marginal areas. 43% of our sucklers are west of the Shannon, so it tends to be over in that area, and it's really, we'll say, hard to make money, like in terms of they're really depending on the support, let that be environmental payments or BPS payments or ANC payments. It's really important that we support that sector, and I suppose it's for the wider agricultural community, Thomas. It's not about just the beef farmers. In terms of, I suppose, the IFA commissioned a study a number of years ago, and it found that for every €1 in direct support to the Irish suckler cow, that meant €4 to the local economy. So again, it doesn't go into a bank savings account for that farmer. It goes into the local community. It keeps shops open in that area, and it's really, really important that we keep those rural communities, we'll say, alive. That the farmers have a lot of other jobs, as well as, I suppose, producing beef or producing sheep or producing milk. They're also custodians of this countryside, and they do a huge amount of public good in terms of environmental work, in terms of looking after our landscape. And only we had farmers in these areas, I don't think we'd have such a picturesque landscape in this country.
So I was one of the first to sign last week as it was going to print. Any more people since then? What's the feedback so far?
Yes, we've had huge feedback so far. We were in Elfinmart on Monday night and we got very positive feedback from farming community and non-farming community. We've had a lot of positive feedback from the non-farming community as well, and saying fair play for fighting for that sector. We've an online petition, so people can go on to farmersjournal.ie/SOS and sign it electronically. We've over 8,500 we'll say signatures on that petition so far, and we have had hundreds coming in through the post already, and we have a campaign of events starting in Donegal on the 20th of February. The one after that is in Cootill, and we're hitting Leitrim, we're hitting Clare, we're hitting Kerry, back up to Roscommon, Athenry, Kilkenny, Meath, and back over to Mayo. So we're really, the road show is starting on the 20th of February, and we're going to hit a lot of counties in terms of where there are a lot of sucklers, and there's an opportunity there to sign. And also today we've sent out partnership packs to rural businesses, vets, marts, and everybody involved in the rural community. So there's a petition there in those businesses that people can go in, sign and show their support for this very important campaign.
Okay, thanks very much, Adam. So, as you said, all the details are in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and online at farmersjournal.ie/SOS. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Thomas.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Adam was also at one of the Co Kerry events organised by Animal Health Ireland and Teagasc around the country at the moment. On the farm of Edward Cooney in County Meath, he first asked Lorna Saiter about the risk of Jonas disease.
Jonas disease is a wasting disease that affects cattle and a few other animal species, but we're focusing here on Jonas disease in the dairy industry. Bacterial infection of the gut. It causes a wasting disease. Animals lose weight and develop a scar and eventually die. There is no cure for this disease, so it's a classic situation of a prevention being better than trying to control the disease afterwards.
If I wanted to know whether I had Jonas in my herd, how would I go about recognising the disease? I suppose you said there are clinical symptoms in animals, but how would I go about? Is there a test I can do to see see if Iones is present in the herd?
Yes, thanks for that. In fact, it's a very insidious disease and it causes loss of production. So one of the most effective ways of identifying whether the disease could be present in your herd or not is to do a herd screening test. And that involves testing all the animals in the herd over the age of 2 years with either a simple blood test or 2 milk tests 90 days apart, and that screening test will determine whether the animals are having an antibody reaction or not.
Okay, and cost of that test, do you know how much that test costs, roughly, we'll say, for a blood test or a milk sample?
Look, the test prices are a wee bit variable, but it's coming in at probably around about €3 a test, and plus any costs associated with the collection of the sample.
Okay, so if I do blood test my herd and I pick up 3 cows with antibodies, what do I need to do with those 3 cows?
Well, I think the most important thing to do first up is to get a veterinary interpretation of the results and to consider progressing to an ancillary test, which is a test of a dung sample to determine whether the animal is truly infected or is still continuing to test negative. The reason for that is that, as I said, it's the ELISA test is the antibody screening test is known. Is just a screening test, and it's really important to know whether the herd's infected or not, so you can put in place some practical strategies at calf during the calving season to prevent the transmission of disease within the herd.
In terms of preventing Iones coming into my farm, what can I do? I suppose, first of all, coming onto the farm, and then on the farm, in terms of, you explain some things in terms of newborn calf protocols, how do I, would say, prevent it from spreading on the farm?
So the most important thing to recognise about Iones disease is that it's a disease that usually enters a farm with a purchase of an animal that appears healthy and normal, and individually may even test negative, but to purchase the animal from what we call low-risk farms. These are herds where the herd owner themselves is undertaking some screening testing and has in place some practices to prevent the transmission of infection to newborn calves.
Okay, and in terms of colostrum and managing colostrum around calving time, is there anything there I can do to try and prevent, I suppose, a spread of Iones on the farm?
Yes, when you consider biosecurity for Iones disease, there's the bioexclusion component, ensuring the disease doesn't come onto the farm, but then it's about biocontainment as well, which is about ensuring that calves have minimal risk to exposure to the bacteria, and the bacteria are excreted in the dung of infected animals. Some of these animals will be excreting before they're picked up at testing, and so it's important that the calf is born into an environment that is as clean as possible, and that the calving pen is kept clean and with an abundance of bedding, and the calf is removed quickly after birth, that the calf is fed clean colostrum, that the colostrum collected from cows is clean, the udder is clean, the hair has been clipped where necessary, and that there's good attention to hygiene in the preparation of the buckets and feeding tubes that are going to be used for feeding the colostrum. That means a hot water and detergent wash. Cold rinsing doesn't remove milk fat, and bacteria like to adhere to milk fat. And so if you have one sample of infected colostrum in a container and it's not washed properly, that sample's bacteria can be transmitted to the next calf. The third step is with milk testing. Sorry, take that back.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. The third step is to ensure that when you're feeding milk to calves, that milk from test positive and infected animals is not put into the pool for the calves. These are calves that are going to be retained for breeding purposes. Very important that they have milk from test negative calves, or in the case of an infected herd, should consider feeding calf milk replacement.
Thanks very much, Lorna. I'm here with Catherine Carty. Catherine, your topic today was disinfection protocols for calf rearing. Being mindful of, we're heading into a very busy time on beef farms and dairy farms over the next few months. Just outline what you spoke to farmers today about in terms of important points as regards, I suppose, disinfection going forward.
So I suppose disinfection and hygiene, I suppose we all know the story at this stage and how important it is, but at the same time I think it's one of those areas where it's easy to fall down, and a critical control point really where things can go wrong and calf health and results or detrimental calf health results as a so I suppose I started today by talking about the principles around maximising the animal's immune system and minimising the infectious challenge. So we know the story about maximising the immune system is about the colostrum management and good pain and nutrition, things like that, and that story is well told at this stage. But no matter whether we stuff them with colostrum or not, we still, if they go into a dirty, wet, mucky environment where they're wet underfoot conditions and there's crypto in the environment, those calves will still get sick. So really it's about minimising the amount of infection that they meet, and that comes down to management of the housing and hygiene really being the be-all and end-all.
So you spoke about, I suppose, washing out, we'll say, calving pens before calving and letting them dry. Very important to let them dry before calving time. That's as good a disinfection as any, nearly, in terms of letting them dry. The proper cleaning disinfectant protocol is absolutely paramount, and that should be done. That day where we clean out the calving pens and the calf pens is a very important day in the farm calendar and shouldn't be underestimated. I mean, at this stage of the year you'd hope it's done and ready to go, but it becomes very important that it's done, that all the bedding is taken out and that it's cleaned. Sometimes a steam wash after that can be very useful, and then followed by a proper and thorough disinfection. So the disinfection needs to be, because none of the disinfectants that we use against crypto, or very few of them, work in the presence of cow dung or organic matter or bedding. So we need to make sure that they're disinfecting a clean, dry surface, and that then that is left to dry, and also rest. So a period of 3 or 4 months rest actually can do a lot after the disinfection to make sure that the sheds are ready for the next season. Crypto problems rear their head every year, I suppose, and in terms of controlling that disease on farms, on beef farms, dairy farms, what can we do to, I suppose, first of all, control it, and then maybe if we do see an incidence of it, in terms of trying to control it within the farm, if we do get it?
So I suppose there's nothing new in that science, but there is a lot of devil in the detail on farms on how that's executed. So the colostrum story and and it's not just about giving 3 litres of colostrum and quickly and things like that. It's about making sure that colostrum is collected hygienically and is given that it's not containing a lot of bacteria, and a lot of detail around that. And we give the calf the best start by the colostrum story, and then we manage them in a clean environment, and we get them on a proper plane of nutrition, that they're getting the right amount of milk and diet. And then we get around the areas of good stockmanship, that as soon as a calf gets sick or is seen sick, that it's pulled out from the others and in a different pen, because really the infectious dose for crypto is very low, and a teaspoon of calf scar contains millions of infective oocysts of crypto, for example. So the infection gets ramped up very quickly with one scar in calf, so it becomes about management of those calves then.
You mentioned some figures there about the length of time it takes, we'll say, for a disinfectant like echinococcus or for coccidiosis as well, in terms of the contact time. What were those figures? So
you always check the label, because they're all very slightly different. Most Enterococcus and echinococcus usually work at a 2% solution with a 2-hour contact time for crypto, and a 3% solution for coccidiosis. But there's very subtle details in that, so that should always be checked on the product you're using. But 2% for 2 hours contact time in relation to Enterococcus and echinococcus. But that is to a clean surface, and absolutely no dung and there, otherwise it won't work.
That's Catherine Carty speaking at the Animal Health Ireland calf care event in Kells County Meath today. Thanks very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
That was vet Catherine Carty ending this report from Adam Woods. Stay tuned for an update on the TB situation in Kerry after this break.
Fodder Transport Scheme unveiled. For more on this week's Farmers Journal, here's Paul Mooney.
We reveal how this scheme will operate and how you can benefit. How forestry is decimating communities in the West. Calving checklist, we've top tips for managing the busy calving season. And how dairy farmers are paying top dollar to lease land.
Plus, with almost 14,000 signatures, make sure your voice is heard in the Irish Farmers Journal's Save Our Sucklers campaign by signing the open letter inside this week's edition. On sale now.
A recent outbreak of TB has hit dozens of herds in a small area of South Kerry. Tommy Moyles reports on the situation in this week's Irish Farmers Journal, and he spoke with Mike and Mark O'Sullivan, 2 of the farmers affected.
Mike, how many animals have you as reactors?
We have 69 as reactors.
How are you dealing with that?
There's a lot of stress with it, and we'll have to work with the department and work with the authorities that are there, see to get to the bottom of it and to get clear again. That's the goal.
I suppose you've been forthcoming in your praise of the department and their efforts to get to the bottom of it. You've been getting on good so far?
Yeah, we're very happy with the department, the two vets in Tralee, Tom Kennedy and John McCormack. They're very efficient and very helpful, and they couldn't do any more. And also our local vets, Cullum and Morris.
What do you think is the issue down here, or how long is it? It's only since 2016, is it, that the issue has been
Well,
here?
I had a clear test. Some years ago I had a reactor, but I had a clear test for years. A clear head, sorry. I had a breakdown the 15th of December, and that was the first inkling I got that the animals had TB. Other than that, we think it must be a wildlife. From what we learn, we think it's the badgers. There are badgers locally, and some people are blaming the deer, but there's no evidence that the deer are spreading it.
Mark, you were saying there that you probably like a bit of parity with with dairy farmers in terms of the information that could be used at the valuations. You're probably happy to a point with some, but it's a frustrating process too.
Yeah, I suppose, as my father said earlier, obviously there's a few angles to this. One is we're completely in agreement with the department that the animals, reactors, have to leave the herd. Unfortunately, it's up to 68, 69 animals now at this stage, and I suppose there's a bit of uncertainty, obviously, whether we'll have 60-day clear tests from now on. But I suppose today we're getting valuation carried out on 29 cattle today, and I suppose we've been unhappy, with the previous evaluation. Like they're valued on their face value as they stand, and some of the animals are just 12 months old, if not younger, and we would keep quite a lot of our animals until they're 2.5 years, and they'd go to the factory. And you might be getting the face value, but we are losing out on money, and I suppose that's probably our main issue at the moment, that it needs to be, particularly the suckler and beef enterprise, the valuation needs to be probably looked at a bit more. And yeah, as you suggested there, there is probably a different mechanism available to dairy farming, but I think something similar should be used in valuing suckler herds as well.
Just by kind of using the information that the ICBF have in a similar way that they do with the production figures for dairy cows, rather than taking the face value?
Yeah, that's definitely worth considering, because maybe 10-15 years ago there was very little data or information available on suckler herds, but we're in the ICBF, we're in the suckler beef scheme as well, so there's a lot of information available on the herd. And my father in particular spent a lot of effort down through the years into breeding stock and buying expensive bulls and keeping particular replacement heifers based on prodigy and all that. So I think that needs to be looked at, because it's facts and it's information that's readily available.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now let's go back to the debate on forestry we started on this podcast last week. The INHFA held a meeting on the issue in Carrick-on-Shannon on Friday, and Amy Ford spoke with the organisation's spokesperson on forestry, Jerry Loftus.
It's not just in County Leitrim. Of course, we are very concerned about County Leitrim, the amount of forest that's been planted in it. But it's at a stage now where we're needing more accurate figures exactly. There's complete contradiction here tonight of the figures that we're being told. The people on the ground are saying there's much more than that. So that's the first thing that we need to look at. We need to look at and get the accurate figures for planting of the County Leitrim. There was a suggestion from the floor that we should put a hold on it, or some sort of a temporary, to stop the planting, any more planting, until we, get the exact figures and all of that. The mood from the meeting here tonight, as I said in my final address, it was one of the most passionate meetings I think I've been at ever in my life, because there's so many people who are really distraught, basically upset at what the counting is actually turning into. We will continue this campaign to make people aware of what we would call the total abuse of taxpayer money in this country. The idea of that we're funding schemes like this with Irish people's money to boost the profits of investors without any consultation with property owners and farmers, is totally unacceptable. But we are willing to work in the INHFA with all environmentalists, all stakeholders, and we have made a proposal here tonight that we will set up such a stakeholders group there is a better way. We can turn our country into this. We are willing to work with everybody, and we will do that.
Staying with forestry, another controversial issue in recent weeks has been that of the partnership contracts signed between Coillte and more than 600 farmers for the development of forestry on their land. A number of farmers told the Irish Farmers Journal that they had huge difficulties in contacting Coillte and working out how much they would be paid and when. I went to Coilte's head office in County Wicklow to ask its Director of Strategy and Business Development, Bill Stanley, what the state-owned company is doing to solve this problem.
Well, I suppose since these issues arose last December, we've started a course of action which is going to continue over the next months and year, in fact. So in December, we wrote to all of our farm partners indicating that we had put in place a dedicated phone line to provide support to them. This was in response to very specific feedback that we had received from some of our partners, that they have been unsatisfied with the level of communications they've received from Coillte, and in fact frustrated that when they tried to reach out to the company that they weren't always clear who their contact point should be. So within that helpline, we now log all calls, we assign them to an appropriate person, and we've given a clear commitment to our partners to respond to them within a 2-week period. In addition to that, we've acknowledged that our communications with our partners have often fallen short of some of the standards that we seek. And a particular theme that has arisen is a level of frustration with the lack of information about payments and how they are calculated. And we're now taking very active steps to address this. And we envisage that this will include a form of annual statement which will detail any payments that have been made to our partners, any payments that are due, and will outline the basis for their calculation. And that will reflect the specific case-by-case contract agreement that we have in place. And I'm happy to just let you know that we have recently retained KPMG to work with us on that project. KPMG will carry out an independent review of how those payments are calculated and verify that the calculation methodology is in line with the contract. And this step is designed to provide a new level of transparency now to our partners on how those payments get calculated, and to give our partners confidence that they're being carried out correctly. I suppose it's important to state that we are initially prioritising partners for whom premiums will expire this year and next year, but it is our intention to provide this information to all of our partners in due course. In some cases, before we can complete updates on the calculations, we will need to carry out a full update of the forest inventory on the site, confirming productivity, updating for any thinnings that have already taken place. And this is a process that we've commenced only last week. Once we have updated the inventory, we then create what we call a resource plan for that particular site. That resource plan will specify a harvesting and thinning schedule, which will include a forecast of volumes, revenues and costs, and we then use that information to forecast the profits from the forest, and then the forecast profits then get divided between the partners in accordance with the specified profit share in the contract.
And would you say when the farmer gets this statement in the end, will they have confidence that there is a fair share of the profit from the forestry, and that they will have enough information and verification by KPMG to be confident that it's a good balance between Coillte and the farmer?
Yes, I do believe so. I think this the intent of this step is, in the first instance, to provide an increased level of transparency between Coillte and the partner. The engagement of KPMG then is to provide a third party and independent validation of that that will be available to the partner. And our intent would be that's expressly designed to give the farmer confidence that the calculations that are taking place are fair and reasonable, they're on a reasonable basis, and that they are in accordance with the terms of the contract. I think it's very, very clear when these contracts were designed and put in place, they were put in place to ensure that the overall value of the partnership is maximised for the benefit of both partners. And this should help to give confidence to our partners that is the case, and that's what's happening here.
There's been criticism by a number of people on the farmer side, such as the IFA, to say that some of the contracts were too favourable to Quilcha in terms of the profit sharing from the forestry. So what would you respond to this?
I think, first of all, what I would say is that there is a very large number of contract types and contract schemes. They are all very different. They all have different payment mechanisms. And I think each contract must be viewed on a case-by-case basis. What I would say is that in all cases the contracts are designed to strongly incentivise Quilcha, and in fact both partners, to maximise the value of the crop. And there are examples there as to how that value is maximised. A key example of that would be the use of certification. But also all of the contracts are designed to give a good balance of benefits to both partners.
Okay, Bill Stanley of Quilcha, thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Irish farms remain overwhelmingly owned and managed by men, but a growing number of women are rising through the ranks in the wider agricultural industry, including Ura and me on the Irish Farmers Journal news desk. Tracy Donaghy interviewed 3 remarkable young women for this week's Irish Country Living. She spoke with Hannah Quinn Mulligan.
Yeah, so I was speaking to Maeve O'Keefe, so she's the Managing Director of Inspect for Hoof. So she basically created the Inspect for Hoof rollover crate, which allows farmers to attend the cow's feet in a way that's much easier than the conventional method.
She's a Nuffield scholar as well. I think I heard her on the BBC actually a while ago. Yeah, she's very impressive.
Yes, so she came up with this idea. She approached her father and then they manufactured it themselves on the farm, and everyone was so impressed then that she was encouraged to take it further, and it's established into this huge business now.
And who's next then? Who's to number 2?
So next we have Dr. Amanda Dunn. So she's from County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland, and she works as a sales and technical manager at Bonanza Cav Nutrition. So she's basically going around dealing with sales and technical, and she speaks to farmers, basically giving them advice for those who request it.
So who's the third person then?
Karen Elif. So she's a beef farmer, and she basically has her own herd. She actually did a equine degree at university, but then her heart was always set in farming. So she came out, she got her herd number, she started her own herd, and she also helps her father at home as well.
And people know her because she was on the Late Late as well, and making some risque comments about castrating bulls, if I remember correctly. So anyway, obviously it's predominantly a male industry, farming, we know that. So how did the women find it? Did they have any comments to make?
Well, one of the things that Maeve said was whenever she was starting off, showing her Inspect for Hoof rollover crate at the shows, a lot of the men were kind of, because she was so young, they were like, oh, what does this young one know about farming? But then as soon as they saw her demonstrated in the video, they were completely taken back by it. In relation to Dr. Amanda Dunn and her job, she was saying that, she goes around farmers all the time and they have no issue at all with her being a female. They don't look at her as if she knows less. And for the beef farmer, Karen, she basically said that because, she's a woman and she's also very glamorous, and she was a former Queen of the Land winner. So she was saying that whenever she tells people that she's a farmer, they literally are left in disbelief. So she's challenging that whole perception too of it.
So it's definitely something that some people should read this weekend. Well, thank you very much, Tracy.
This is our lot for this week. Ferdia Mooney was on sound. From me, Thomas Hubert, safe farming, and talk to you next week.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.